Good evening. Welcome to the Citizens Participation Meeting for the 611 through 633 proposed Church Street student-focused high-rise. My name is Brad Moore. I'm a local architect, and I'm part of the team for this project. I have tonight with me other team members, including representatives from the ownership group, the civil engineering group, and the lead architect. We're here tonight to explain where we are in the evolution of the project, to solicit questions and comments as we go through the process, give us the opportunity to take those into consideration as we move forward. I'm going to kind of give an overarching diatribe on the process, where we are in the process, and what's going to happen down the road on the path to hopefully approval for the project. And then I'm going to turn it over to some other team members to describe the details of the project. In Ann Arbor, this is the beginning of the process of the entitlement, as it's called, for the project. Some people call it site plan approval. It starts with the public engagement, and that's the citizen participation meeting. We have had some feedback from the design review board on the same sketches and concepts you're going to see here tonight. So we'll take the comments from the design review board, we'll take the comments from tonight. We'll craft a final submission that will then go into the city planning department for review by the city staff. After the city staff has reviewed it thoroughly several times over, it will then be proffered on to the planning commission for their consideration. And in this case, since we're not asking for a change in the zoning, the planning commission will be the final approving authority. You have the opportunity during this meeting to offer comments, ask questions. During the staff review process, you can log on and see the submittal documents to the city's online portal called Stream. You go to the city's website, a2gov.org, and you type in Stream into the search bar. It'll take you to a page where you can click on a link. It will take you to the Stream portal, and you can search every project that's been submitted for site plan approval, or rezoning, a building permit. You can follow along as the staff reviews the process. You can also give your comments to the city staff as they're reviewing it, so they have your comments. And then once the city staff is convinced that the submission is thorough enough, they'll give us a date, and we'll go to the planning commission, in which case there'll be another public hearing in planning commission, and then planning commission will deliberate. So that's going to be a higher view of the process. So you've got plenty of opportunity to offer comments as the process goes along. I'm going to turn it over to, what's your name? Mr. Savoy. He's with Core, one of the developers, and he's going to run through the project and kind of give you some aspects of the project, and then we'll take questions.
Thanks, Brad. All right, so I'm Andy Savoy with a company called Core Spaces. We are a developer based out of Chicago. We are half of the development sponsor for this deal. The other half is Jared Schenk, who's sitting right there, and also ask questions. And so we have two other members of our team here. We have Scott Betzel, who's our civil engineer, Nate Castillo, who's with DLR, the architecture firm that's working with us, and then obviously Brad. So just a little bit about us. 5-second spiel. Core's been doing university-focused residential development for over 15 years, and we've gotten to the point where we have either purchased or developed over 30,000 beds across the country. Schenk, similar kind of size, also kind of a national university-focused housing owner. And we've done projects all throughout the country, several in the Midwest, and we actually have 3 going on right now in Ann Arbor. This is the third of 3, one at William, we have one at Packard and State, and this is kind of the third one that we are working on. And you'll see as I go along, there's a lot of pieces that are still moving, and so we've prepared a few just kind of alternative schemes to also show you, just to kind of try to anticipate every possibility here. So the site is an assemblage that's right across the street. Starts at 611 Church, which is directly left of me, and goes all the way down to the end of the block. 633 Church and 1207 Willard is included. that's shown in red right here. And so you'll see that there's a dotted red line. That's the Downtown Development Authority's boundary. So we're half in that, half outside of it. And the zoning is D1, which is one of the most dense underlying zoning codes, zoning classifications you can have in town. The by right zoning height is 150 feet. And there is a section in the code where we can actually get bonus height up to 195 feet if we do certain things. And that is basically including a sustainability element, is what it's called in the zoning code. And that is basically wiring the building so that it could be all electric at one point in time, and also including solar panels on 60% of the roof, which we do plan to do. And so what you're about to see is by right, including that bonus FAR, or the bonus height that is specifically allowed for in the code as is. So we would not be going for a planned development here. So what this shows is kind of the big idea of what we're proposing. So it shows in a red dashed line the absolute maximum envelope that the zoning code allows. And then you'll see in a light red color at the bottom a base, and then a tower is above that. We have kind of an articulated corner piece that you'll see in more detail later. And then the tower kind of steps back above the base, which is a function of how the development code reads. It's actually required to do that. You will notice that we are spanning over an alley. You can kind of see that right there. That's the alley right there that we'd be spanning over. And so we have negotiated to actually be able to do that. We have maximum clearances we have to keep in order to keep that alley functional. And there's still a lot of thought that needs to go into how that's going to happen, how that's going to remain functional through our construction. There's a lot we still need to figure out about that in many. So we've kind of, as we started to think about how we planned this building, we stuck with the whole massing of kind of a tower above a base articulation. So you'll see 2 floors of what is massed out to be kind of like public space, public scale. And so you see retail, lobby functions, more or less the more public functions of the building along the base. And that's got kind of a dark brick tone to it. And then that's separated by a clear story floor, so you don't have 2 things touching, just as a design concept that's bad. And then we have kind of a warm kind of articulation of gridded facade expression above. And so we tried to play with the pattern of the panels so that there's kind of this dynamic dancing that goes on above. And we also tried to extend the proportions. So this is a 19-story building. Instead of being 19 things, 19 pancakes, we tried to actually use the facade system to make this 3 or 4 things. And that way it just becomes less repetitive and just a little bit more engaging, and it's, we like the way that played better. And I think the design review board felt a little bit better about that. You'll notice that we have kind of a corner element that is a little higher than the rest of the building. We wanted to make that corner a little bit kind of special because you do have 2 frontages there. You'll see some townhomes along Willard, which we can look at more detail. Look at those in more detail later. This is a facade. This is kind of an elevation showing what I just said. And you'll see the alley is right there. And so we've thought about this base as, let's let the retail occupy the north part of that and let the lobby functions occupy the south part. That alley is going to remain open and in use by the city and the public. That is public space. We've kind of broken up the mass here, and so you have this kind of articulated special corner section to the right, the rest of the building to the left, with kind of a minor step back above to start to communicate some different heights in the building. These are the plans, and so north is up in these plans. So that alley is right here in each plan. And so starting at the basement level, we just kind of have mechanical functions. It's all underground. There is some retail square footage down here, similar to what exists there now. The ground floor, more retail square footage. large bike rooms, and then all of that kind of lobby and amenity program that would go along with our residential use would be located on the south side of the alley. You'll notice, so dark blue in these plans indicates a residential use. So along Willard, where you already have somewhat of a residential feel, we've programmed that with townhomes. So those would be 2-story rental units that would actually have a front door that opens out onto Willard. And you can see those later. And then the second floor is just, you'll see the top floor of those townhomes and then additional amenity space. So that full 25-foot span of the base is all kind of active use, where you either have retail on the left side or you have the amenity space on the right side if you're looking at the site from where I'm sitting. These are some street views just to show you how we've kind of thought about how you enter the building. And so rather than push the entry as far close to campus as we could, we kind of wanted to bring everybody to the center of the site and make this alleyway something special. So we were thinking about some kind of art wall that could be used to kind of activate this alley. And maybe you even allow some kind of retail use from the alley. And then we wanted to actually have our main entry for the residential portion of the building build off of that. And so we located the residential entry basically right in front of where we are now. That would be an inset entry where you have a nice 20 by 20 covered area that you would actually go into the building and then take a right and go into our lobby. And so that's what you're seeing here is that covered area. And then this is what that looks like from the south, looking north on Church. This is looking south on Church from the northernmost point, looking at the retail. So the retail is to the left. We did program this upper space with some additional residential. And so you do have a 15-foot retail area here with some residential above. And then on the other side of the alley, you have 2 floors of amenity space. So this kind of shows you what that starts to look like. These are the townhomes that I mentioned. 2-story expression right along Willard to just offer a good variety of housing types, because we don't like, if everything's a flat, you know, we like to lease. It helps our leasing to have plenty of different options for anybody who wants to live with us. And so having some townhome type options that open right onto the street has been successful for us in the past. And then, since I have you, this is, we wanted to show a few, so there are a few elements of the deal that aren't yet finalized. One of those is the southernmost parcel on Willard. We're making progress on that, not yet finalized, so I wanted to show what it would look like if that didn't happen. And then the same goes for the 611 parcel. There is a tenant there that has an ongoing lease. We're working through that and what that looks like. If that didn't work out, we could actually phase the construction. So you actually work on the south side first. After that lease would naturally expire, we could go back and work on the north side. And so we wanted to get all that included in this so that it's all out on the table of anything you could possibly expect to see in the future. And then our architect put together this great fly-through video, which we can all watch, and then I'll open it up for questions. So obviously start from the south. You're going to go down to Church and work north on Church. Kind of looking at the building, that 2-story expression that I mentioned at the base. And then that's that recessed entryway. That's the alley. Kind of see that expression here in the articulation. All right. And that concludes my part of the presentation. can open it up for questions, comments. I know you probably have a lot of questions and ideas. So the point of this is to hear you all so that we can incorporate that into what we actually submit. So we've already done this with the design review board. They've kind of given us their comments. We want to hear your comments as well, initial reactions, etc.
So
Yes,
my
ma'am.
question is, how long does CORE stay involved with the development after it's complete?
So it depends on the financial partner we bring in, but usually that's 7 to 10 years.
Okay, so our concern at a community level is that you're in, you build, you get your profit, you get out, and then we have all these monoliths in what was a kind of cozy downtown student area that are unsustainable in the long run unless Michigan's enrollment is exploding. Because I understood you to say you're involved on the William Street project at all? Is that where the credit union is coming down?
That's correct.
And you're on the south side in Southtown or the Packard?
Packard site, that's
And
correct.
are you involved in the 7-Eleven church? Or
We're not.
Okay,
No.
so we have 7-Eleven church, we have 611 church, we have Landmark coming across the street. This is all completely built up and we just don't know how invested the people that created are in our community. Are you in, are you, and get your profit and get out?
Well, I would say that we're definitely in. We're building housing for 3,000 people in this market, and 10 years is an eternity in the world of developers. A lot of developers sell that building right when as soon as it's leased up.
I completely understand that, which is what we're looking for, a commitment to the community as opposed to a, hey, here's your product, I'm gone now.
Right.
That being the case, I'm curious as to where you're getting this input that the very modern structures are how we want to go. Because what I hear on the street is, if I see another damn monolith in town, I'm just going to move, basically. But I know we talked to the 7-Eleven people at Church Street about how do you make this look a little more community, a little more neighborhood. You're invading the neighborhood. You aren't. You actually are in what I consider the student building area. But how do we get away from a lot of glass and wall pieces, rather than brick and mortar? And is there a way to impact? Well, walk down East University. All those buildings that were built there, and even the ones that are built on this side of church, have very similar frontages. There's no uniqueness, and this is a town that had really prided itself on its uniqueness. We get a lot of hotel lobby look, and a lot of little retail space that can't stay rented out. That was the concern with the last meeting I was at here, that these businesses are coming and going, that we're providing a retail space that doesn't have longevity for whoever's going in there.
So I would tell you that we're working to kind of have a lot of that retail space filled. We might have a tenant that's coming with us. We're working on it. And so that would be a long-term tenant. And then most of the actual square footage of the ground level is south of the alley, and that we actually control so that we can ensure that that remains active and lively at all times. Now, staff and the DRB both really liked the way that we articulated the ground floor, and that base they thought was really engaging. So you have retail space, you have an activated alley with an art wall, you have a space that you could come in and get out of the rain, like a full 20 by 20 foot space that is underneath the building that creates a really nice kind of vestibule feature. And then you have more of your amenity space, and they thought that was really successful. If you have specific suggestions, that is why we're here. So,
Well, one specific would be take a look at your colors, your building, and then do a little research on the comments that came out after Ross School of Business came out with their color that is very similar. There was a huge pushback on that color. I don't remember all the history of it.
right.
I just remember Does anybody remember what they called it? It was derogatory. The terracotta pot, that's what they called it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of press on it. I would recommend that you read up on it. I'm not a decorator. I have no say one way or the other, but it's worth reading the history in this town on that color.
We will. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, you mentioned having the building be prepared for future electrification. That's something people should be doing now. The city of Ann Arbor has 20, 30, 100% renewable energy goals. 60% of the roof being solar. What percentage of the use is going to be solar? And also, tearing down serviceable existing buildings is extremely wasteful, and building with a lot of regular concrete is very carbon intensive. It emits a lot of greenhouse gases. This does not sound to me like a 21st century energy efficient building that's consistent with our city's A20 goals.
So to that, so we're actually working harder than anyone else on that. So at State and Packard, which is the other deal we just got approved last night, we're actually working on upgrading the grid so that there could be enough electricity to serve that building. That requires work in this area. We were just touring that site with DTE this morning, and they were complaining, what are we going to do now? We don't have enough energy. And so I think we're limited by a practical reality, the fact that they cannot serve everyone right now. So the zoning code allows for that, and they say, all right, if you can't be served right now, then you have to provide an electrical panel that could service the building whenever it's available, and you have to have all the conduit in the building so that whenever it's available, you could actually switch to all electric. And that is what we are planning to do. That's how we get the extra height here. And so the code does allow for that. We have not spoken with DTE yet about how feasible it is to serve this building as all electric. We plan to do that. As you can see, there are several different options here. They can't tell us anything until we tell them how big the building is. And so I think that from our other two projects, William is all electric. Packard, we're paying to upgrade the grid so that it could be all electric. For this one, we will try. I'm not at a point where I can promise anything right now.
Well, but also, the best energy is the energy that's never used, so-called megawatts, as Amory Levins explained in the late 1970s. And that means maximum insulation, ceiling, energy efficient, everything. And I'm not hearing that.
Well, we are still kind of early in the design process, so I can tell you that the skin right now is thought to be a kind of a prefabricated panel, like a stove panel or something similar. There's a very high R value for that. It's very efficient in terms of energy, and Nate can probably speak to that.
Yeah, one thing about the stove panels, it's a continuous insulation system, so you have no thermal bridging.
Yeah,
So
could
that
you speak
helps.
up? Sorry.
So,
Could you speak up?
yeah, so the stove panel is a continuous insulation system, so it has no thermal bridging. So that helps with the energy reduction for the project. So it's a high-performing wall system, essentially. That combined with our MEP systems that are highly efficient, our glazing system that will be highly efficient as well, that all incorporates to a full shell or skin that is high-performing for the building.
What about parking? I don't see any plan for traffic or parking for all these people.
That's correct. And so the thought is that our residents could actually lease parking from the adjacent deck, which is right there.
Isn't that sort of already maxed out on terms of rental?
So you're competing with U Towers, Landmark, 711 Church, 721 Church, 722 South Fourth. The only other parking lot in the area is the Ross Business School.
Every turn that we've made, we've been encouraged to limit parking or eliminate it completely.
So who do you think we should address our comments to as people who live on those streets and have parking issues?
Yeah.
The city?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. really about the alley. You talk about it in multiple ways, and my question really is, how is that going to function? You talk about it as both that it's going to remain as a pass-through for traffic, but you also talk about it as a little plaza where people can, hang out or shelter during the rain, as you put it, or something like that, as being a place of experience. So how is it really going to work? If there's trucks going through, and I think I heard, I listened in on the design review, it seems like you're expecting that garbage trucks are going to go through there, for instance?
That's correct.
Really? So how can it really function as a plaza, as a place for people?
Well, so I was thinking that our actual entry, this kind of vestibule condition, would be the place to kind of shelter from the rain. It's kind of an outside space
That will
outside,
allow
inside
people
space.
in, it's not going to have a door lock on it?
Well, right, so you can see the doors here. So this is all exterior, right? So the doors here, this is the alley. So that outside space would actually open up right onto the alley. And then we were thinking that if we had a tenant that would occupy the basement and would want kind of a unique entryway, maybe that could be accessed from the alley somehow. That alley could be more of an experiential thing because they do pick up trash there. They don't pick up trash 24/7. And so we were trying to take something that is not a feature right now and make a feature out of it.
Well, they talked about it with the building that we're in, the pizza house.
Right.
That they were going to indeed create a little plaza that was also going to have garbage access. And you see that became a bar instead.
Right.
So I don't know, a really workable garbage truck plus pedestrian amenity is really going to be.
Right. It is admittedly a tough problem, and we're working on how it would work. So.
And just a side comment or question really is Rick's going to go in, or this is really a subject of discussion still?
So it's an ongoing conversation right now.
Okay, because it sounded like when you were design review, you were saying Rick's, is going to move it back in.
Right. I don't want to presume anything about the result of those conversations.
Because when you were talking about the basement space and then the first floor, that's
Right. I mean, that is obviously what this is.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Yes, sir.
Yeah, thanks. A follow-up. Well, first of all, thank you for showing up here, Mr. Savoy, and speaking with all of us and your whole team. Very much appreciated. I have a follow-up question about the alley as well. We heard from the city administrator several weeks ago that you mentioned that you negotiated to keep that alley functional. Obviously negotiated with the city, and we heard at the city council that this involves a $1.2 million payment from you to the city. Can you talk more about that? When was that negotiated? And what were the terms, and when will that transfer of funds take place?
I don't know if I can talk about that. So I don't know. It's details of the contract. I would have to actually look at it and see if there's even a confidentiality provision, which I'm not even sure if there is. So, but relatively recently, within the past year, that was negotiated, and I'm not sure if I can say much more. So,
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Another question. This one about the townhomes.
Yep.
Who is that really going to be pitched to? It's going to be students, or you're trying to get non-students to?
We rent to whoever will rent.
Of course, but it's, who are you
We
really?
expect students to live there.
You expect students. So why is that any different than just turning it into, a space that's continuous with the rest of the building?
If I may, I think part of it, you have a lot of single-family homes in the area facing Willard. We felt like it was a homage to of the pedestrian experience. And I know
Because there's houses there.
and 100%. And having gone and lived here for 8 years, I feel like, yes, we're building towers. It is 19 stories. It is hard. When you have a 19-story structure, it's going to be large by definition. And so by creating these little elements that engage the street front, we try to mitigate that a little bit, make it more approachable from the street. And so that's the intention of it. We try to be thoughtful, and hopefully we'll be appreciated by people.
Right, but it sounds like the expectation still is that it will be student groups that are going to most likely.
Anybody that wants to live there, and it's not said flippantly at all. It's more of course, we'd like to have a diverse community of people that want to live there. But by definition, and the very reason you're asking, it probably is yes, and there probably will be, the same way there are students living in the houses across the street. But, we're trying to create an experience that can appeal to a lot of different people.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
When you talk about a diverse community living there, what's being done for students who can't afford this type of housing? Did you laugh? Because I think of townhouses as like the wealthiest of students who come here.
Yeah, of course.
So like, don't have townhouses. But what about students who come to school here who are on scholarship and can't afford townhouses and new buildings?
Well, I think the very nature of adding so much housing to a market is going to spur competition between everyone. Because right now we're adding supply, and one of the other comments I heard is demand. What if demand doesn't keep up? Prices go down. And so I think the very nature of adding this supply does make everything.
So you're not
more affordable.
subsidizing any of the units for students who can't afford?
That is not the plan right now.
Would you consider it?
We would consider it looking at a financial pro forma, but it's very punitive to do that.
Punitive?
To him.
For whom?
Well, I mean, we operate on a very fine margin, so it doesn't take much for a deal to just not be financeable.
But we also try to provide higher density units with, you get this whole piece of it. The more, if you have more bedrooms in a unit, those are price points that are more affordable. And so yes, but you can then debate about, well, what is affordable? And it's a slippery slope. I totally get it. But the point is, we will provide some higher density units that'll hit the more affordable price points. But it's market driven, and it'll react accordingly.
Yes, ma'am?
I mean, I would say the design is attractive. I just think, like people have mentioned, we have so many really high buildings around here. It just starts to feel really out of place. That, I guess, is my basic comment. The other question I have is, is there a sense of the size of the apartments, or is that something that is still yet to be figured out?
So our typical apartment size ranges from 350 square feet for the smallest to over 1,600 square feet for the largest.
So it's like
large
studio
up to
to
6 bedrooms. in
studio
one.
to 6.
Right. And so it's a variety, and we typically curate that based on the actual school, because different schools have different units that perform better. And so,
What do you mean school?
well, just different universities
Oh, I see.
have a different profile of unit that performs better. And so we look at the market, the exact location, and try to curate a unit mix that
You see what
yeah.
apartments are around here, what seems to be what students like.
Exactly. That's correct. And so we haven't actually dialed that all the way in. So there's some flexibility in terms of the actual
Like
mix,
how
but
many
it
go
will
on one
include,
floor?
small units with single people, single occupant units, and then also units with up to 6 people. So,
And then are there, a lot of these buildings have all these higher end amenities, pools, tanning, workout. Do you deal with that at this point, or is that a later thing?
it would be a later thing. We haven't designed it, we haven't hard-lined it, but we have assumed that we will have a lot of amenity space. Most of it at the ground floor in that kind of base element, but there will be kind of a penthouse roof area where residents will be able to access the roof for study space or what have you.
So, with regard to that, we are questioning the planning staff. The building at 721 South Forest, we have a lot of concerns because the pool is on the roof. If you had something at the roof level, would it be enclosed, garden area? We're concerned about debris falling off, students falling off, you name it, we're worried about safety. How do you guys address that?
So we've done that on quite a bit of projects. Putting the pool on the roof is, it makes a huge impression for your residents. It's a cool space. And so we have kind of controlled that by giant glass walls, 7-foot glass walls that nobody would ever just fall over. And we haven't had any incidents of that actually across our portfolio. Just because there is usually an offset from where the edge of the building is to where the glass is, and and then the glass is really tall. And then obviously there are moratoriums on, you know, how late you can put lights, you can have lights going. So just from being a nuisance even from far away, typically deal with the municipalities, set rules on that and obey them. And that's what we would do in this case.
Thanks, I'm old, I worry about safety.
So is their insurance.
Believe me, I'm aware of that too.
So do you have a sense of what the increase would look like to the student, or what?
What's the question? I can't hear it.
Would you talk about
Yeah, you have your hand over your face
We can't
and
hear
you're
the question.
speaking. Yeah.
Sorry, the question that I had was if you had a sense of what the unit mix would be with occupancy.
So it depends. So I've shown you 3 different options, right? So the biggest option is roughly 1,200 occupants at the max. But that is also subject to the actual variation that can occur whenever I change the unit mix, right? So if you go down, the maximum that would be 1,200. Then you have all these pieces of the site that could be carved out with different options I've shown you. So it could certainly be less. That's probably close to the max it would be. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to comment on what you had said about supply and demand. I've lived in this neighborhood for a really long time. And what I have found is each new building goes up, it's more expensive than the building before because it wants to say it is the most luxurious, the fanciest, the nicest. And when that happens, all the other buildings go up in rent as well. Even some of the small landlord buildings do that because no landlord wants to say our place is inferior. And in this neighborhood, because it's so close to the U of M, they get it. And so what this does is make an ever spiraling increase in price of rent for students.
That might be true in this specific area because it's so perfect for student housing development. And I was speaking more of the macro market, right? This area is obviously the best place for density. And if we want to shoot for, I mean, we are going to be a new building. We cannot, you know, I can't do anything about that. When we deliver, that building is going to be brand new. It's going to be the newest thing you could possibly rent. And so to ask for a rent that is appropriate for that is something that, I mean, I don't think, I wouldn't apologize for doing it. I think it's appropriate for how good the site is, how close it is to the university, and the level of product that we're going to be delivering.
Just a point of clarification. This is a by right project, meaning that if you just follow the existing regulations, it should slide through.
It is a by right
I
product.
don't know that I would ever use the word slide.
You get pushed.
But yes, it's a by right product, so the approval process stops at planning commission instead of council.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, if you don't mind, a second question for me, since I don't see other hands up. On the electrification and readiness of the building, can you speak to exactly what measures you're taking? You mentioned panels and conduit. My cursory understanding of building electrification at this scale is that the systems are completely different throughout the building for electric, all electric versus gas furnaces or boilers, right? You probably use a VRF kind of system where you're running heads, the individual rooms from a central air source heat pump in an electric situation, whereas you'd probably be using forced air with yeah, so so the whole guts of the building would have to be different. It's not just a matter of conduit, you know, and panels, right? Or am I wrong on that?
Well, so it's a complicated issue because that's actually what we're going through on Packard now, is trying to understand is DTE going to be able to serve us. And so that involves some duplicative measures. So like engineering, wait for a boiler on your roof but then also providing VRF in the appropriate shafts, so that if you have to switch, you can switch over to a centralized system. And so we're working through that now. It's very complicated, you're right.
Yeah, and duplicative too, I mean,
It is duplicative.
but you're willing to do that for 732? At this point anyway, at least in the design space.
Well, right, for 732, we have some flexibility, and we're investing in the DTE grid, but if they can't service, then we have to go forward with the deal in another way. So we are actually trying to understand how we could design this building so that it's a quick change, and we would get the notice of whether or not they would be able to serve us well before delivery, so we have time to make that change during the construction phase.
But if they cannot serve you at this location, or can't serve you with enough for all electric,
Right.
and let's say 5 years down the road they can, they upgrade the local grid, are you really going to have the building ready to go for electric with a VRF?
They do, so they do have electric boiler, like giant electric boilers that you could use in lieu of a gas boiler for a centralized system.
But then you're using, you're distributing hot water throughout the building rather than hot air.
Right.
Yeah, and that's not nearly as efficient, right?
Right.
Okay,
So
that's all we
I'm
want.
not an engineer. We are figuring it out. We have 3 options that I'm showing you right now. So we haven't gotten down to every doorknob yet, and that's a big one. So
Thank you.
yes, ma'am.
What are the, I'm not sure I have the right word, what are the issues with building a building that is not as high? Like what, I'm just ignorant of the whole, like what it takes in terms of financing. What are the impediments to just building a smaller building? Why is everything always so many floors?
Well, it's a result of land values and construction costs. Land values are high here. Construction costs are really high here compared to the rest of the country. And so in order to cover that spend, you need density in order to basically offset the higher than usual costs that go into a development.
Land value, I get. Construction costs, do you have an opinion about why this is more expensive here?
I don't have an opinion that I can prove or would want to advertise in a public forum right now. But there are reasons I could talk to you about later that I think construction costs are higher here. I mean, they're higher here than in Chicago. In downtown Chicago, they're lower than here.
No, it's a really interesting point. We bring in contractors from Chicago to do some of the work because we can maybe get some subs that can actually do the work for cheaper. And it just shows how high it is to build here. And also in terms of the density, the city is really pushing, is requesting
And I
density.
get it.
So,
You
I mean,
know,
but in
environmentally, I totally get it, but at some point, it just seems a little crazy. I mean, it's just, this looks like it's like a modern, like it would be at home in New York City or Chicago, or, you know what I mean? It looks like a hotel, or it looks like a fancy apartment building that would be in a bigger city. I mean, it just.
it is interesting. It's like, it's 19 stories, and that's what the underlying zoning is, and that's what they're pushing. And we did try to create, we're proud of the design, but we understand what you're saying. It's in contrast to some of the other, to what Ann Arbor was 20 years ago, and that's some of the pushback.
Right, I mean, and I get that the city is, the city basically is allowing this. It's not like you guys are, determining that it's 19 stories. You're going to what the city will allow you to do. So it's not like, I have a beef with the city because of that. But I'm just wondering, what is
Just
the
all those
background
costs,
of what even makes all of these have to be so high?
So, I mean, this video kind of shows it. So there's a 19-story building here. There's a 19-story building here. So we're a 19-story building in between 2 other 19-story buildings. I think it's appropriate at that point. Both your neighbors are
But in this general, when you look around at the whole landscape, and it's, I mean, I could get 6, 8. You know what I mean? It's such a big step up. Like when these start going up, you just sort of feel like it's claustrophobic. That's my opinion.
What's the height limit if you don't get the credits for electrification?
150.
And how many stories is that?
And 13-ish.
Yeah. Depends on the height of your ground floor, but around 15 max.
How high is it? 100, 200?
This is 195 feet, so we're trying to stay below the by right height. And so that's what we've been targeting, so.
And what's the square footage at the maximum? You know what the square footage would be at the maximum?
Nathan, you remember the gross square footage, and that's including non-rentable space. Do you have that you said?
Roughly.
I don't know if we had that on this, or like the yard, or,
I don't think we did.
I don't know.
We can follow. I can see.
It was mid 400s, if I can remember correctly. And that's the largest speed.
Did you sign in on the sign sheet?
I have not yet, but I will.
If you do, everybody's going to sign in will get a copy of the report, and we'll figure out the answer to that between the report.
Awesome, thank you.
When you say 400 square feet, you mean 400,000 square feet? What?
I mean, mid 400, like I would guess
Yes.
between 420 and 435,000 square feet if you put me on the spot. And that's every square foot, even underground square feet, and you know, it's the entire buildable square footage of that building. All right, yes, sir.
Hey, sorry, one more. This is the third sizable building that, you know, you're putting up in Ann Arbor. I know you work in a lot of other cities. Can you give us some insight into your thinking? How do you view Ann Arbor in general as a market for your kind of product? What's the outlook from the Core Spaces executive suite in Chicago right now? How do you look at our city?
We love it. It's huge university. It's got a relatively low acceptance rate, so it can maintain enrollment very well. We see it as a very, very friendly market.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So would you say that this, based on what I've heard you say, would you say that the city government, the city has created an environment that has made it necessary to build these tall buildings in order to make it because of all the value, like you said, because of the financially, I don't know, responsible. I don't know, you know,
Or
just
worthwhile.
worthwhile.
They're not
That's
going
what
to do
you're
something where they're
saying.
going to lose money.
Is that why all of these are the same height? Like
I
you're,
wouldn't characterize it that way.
because that's how it almost sounded like you were characterizing
So
it.
the city wants more housing. City council and the mayor, they want more housing. And for the reason that when you add supply, prices tend to go down. And so they've made the decision to try to incentivize that. I think they've been very public about that, about trying to incentivize more housing. We asked them to go taller, and they said no. They said they wouldn't support it. So, I mean,
And remember, it's just, again, by right, so I think that feeds into what he's saying, in the sense that we're literally following the underlying zoning code, which articulates the mission of the city to add density in this quadrant. And so, because it's by right, we are literally just building within the legal envelope of what we can do. That's all we're doing.
But I did hear you say you built it to this height because of costs. Is that not what you said?
No, what I said is, if you're gonna spend so much on land, and construction costs, you're gonna want to build the most you can as of right. And that's all we're doing.
Yes, ma'am?
Hi, did you consider the 150-year-old Italianate building in your process at all?
Not yet, but we're here to listen to you, so.
It's a shame that the owner obviously decided to sell out. It's beautiful, it's 150 years old. Is there anything that you could do with it? Incorporate it into the design, like the Carnegie Library at least has, you know, a facade. You know, you could still sort of drive along and say, oh yeah, that's that, and that happened, and I remember that, or my grandpa remembered that, you know?
Right.
Great idea.
We'll have to look at it, yes, sir.
I'm the owner.
Oh, you
So,
are?
yes, and we have been and are talking about whether or not we can move it.
Okay.
It is totally impractical to try to incorporate it into a model building. Like, it kind of defeats the purpose of building a model building, right? We're trying to get the density that we can get here before developers are. But yes, it hasn't.
Is there like a courtyard there, you know?
It hasn't.
Empty it out, make it a courtyard?
It hasn't escaped us that it's a beautiful old building. I've loved it, worked out of it for 30 years.
Why
And
sell?
what's that?
Why sell?
Well, so when we started here, we're a local landlord. We do scattered site. I've been paying attention to this housing market for a long time. When we came here 30 years ago, every single house on the street was a property management company.
Yeah.
There was a proximal necessity. Everyone would walk up and down both sides of the street and collect flyers to figure out what was available for housing.
Yeah.
The internet and a number of other factors that the transition of that has made it so almost no one ever walks through our doors there. It doesn't have a lot of residential units, and it's our home office. We don't know where we're going to go. But what we do know is that the need to be this close to students who just want to walk into the question, it's become obsolete. Not by our choice, but just, it's no longer landlord row. It used to be. We're like the last holdout of a landlord on this block. And also, even if we were all still here, students don't walk through our door anymore. It's just, we're not going to use it the same way. So its utility for what we set out and what we've done there for decades has changed outside of that. One of the other things
It'd be nice outside.
what's that?
I mean, it's a beautiful house.
It would be nice, but so one of the other things we keep talking, in this whole conversation, one of the things we're talking about is you know, it's as though this is an interplay between developers and the city, and the thing that doesn't get mentioned enough, that's the major factor, is the university. We are acting like we decide on what density we want here, but what's really been happening is the new units that have been growing in the city for the last 20 years that I've been watching have met the increase in demand from the university on a 1-to-2 ratio. That means demand has climbed twice as fast as supply for the last 2 decades. As much as we've built here, our housing demand has grown by twice that. So we're not meeting it. That need or that fever that the city has to do this, it's being driven by the university and its growth. I see that every day just in dealing with people who are looking for housing, and there's not enough of it. So in a place where you're blocks from the diag, and it's an easy place for a student from another country to get to without using a car, this is the optimum place to have higher density. It's a good thing to do from a community standpoint. And it was a discussion that I was a part of at least 15 years ago when it was zoned D1. That those discussions about where should we put this housing when we need it, this is the place, among others, that we picked.
So it's been D1 for more years, right?
Yeah.
It's a long time.
Yeah, I'd like to just add on that last comment about, you know, this was student rental row along here, and this building actually is where several of those went out of the way. But Tom and Fred Gruber have their office over on Forest, that's just a block from here. So they still, you know, meet with their tenants.
Oh, I know
in
that. I
their
talk
house.
to Fred all the time, but they don't come through the door the way they used to. You can still come into my office too. But what used to be hordes of people coming through during leasing season is one or two. Everyone does it online. Most of my apartments are rented before I even meet the tenant. It never used to be that way, but we didn't pick that. And I'm sure it's the same for Mr. Gruber, even though his office is still. It's not being used the way it was.
On the postcard that was mailed out is the office email from my office. I'm a victim of delayed intelligence. That is, I always think of my best questions after the meeting. You do. Please feel free to email me at my office, and we'll incorporate the emails questions into the report as well.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.